Okay. Is my voice is clear? Okay, thank you. Okay, I thank Dr. Venkatesan for this, for inviting me and for this opportunity to present my PhD research uh, at the 30th International Virtual Learning Series organized by Arulmigu Kalasalingam College of Pharmacy. So, just a minute. Yeah. Okay, yes. Uh, okay, so um, I planned to present my PhD thesis. Okay, so the title of my PhD thesis is Ethnobotany, Phytochemistry, and DNA Metabarcoding Studies on Indian Traditional Medicine. So, in this talk, I'm just going to provide an overview of my PhD thesis. Okay, so so before going to the topic, so I just want to inform you all that my expertise is on pharmacognosy. So, especially the quality control aspects of herbal drug is my major expertise. Apart from that quality control aspects, my expertise is also on natural product chemistry. So, and a little bit of my brief background is that I completed botany for my bachelor's degree and biotechnology for my master's degree in St. Joseph's College, Trichy. And then I have worked on two different research institutes in Bangalore. One is FRLST and another is ATRI. And then I have done my PhD in University of Oslo, Norway. So currently I'm doing my postdoctoral research in Morgan State University, USA. So this is my PhD thesis. If someone is interested in reading my PhD thesis, it's available in University of Oslo library. I mean, in online, you can go to the University of Oslo library service and you can download the PDF format of this PhD thesis. If someone is interested after my presentation to know more about my PhD. So, yeah, if I'm too fast when I'm talking, just you can just tell in between, or else if you are not able to understand something, you can ask me at the end of this. Okay, so I have arranged my talk in this following way. First, a few slides I talk about human history, traditional medicine, and how we use plants as therapeutic agents, and then the approaches for drug discovery, and then traditional medicine guided drug discovery, and also a small definition about reverse pharmacology, and then quality control of herbal drugs. So I have structured my talk in the so first, a little bit about human history. So before the dawn of civilization, we were generally hunter-gatherers. We were happily roaming around the forest searching for food, and that society is called foraging societies. So the archaeological evidence says that we learned to control fire approximately 1.9 million years ago. From that time onwards, the last major evolutionary shift happened in humans is approximately 1,80,000 years ago, which is the ability to chase the food. And then the other archaeological evidence says that we started to do agriculture approximately 10 to 15,000 years ago. So once we started to do how to do agriculture, we started to settle down as an agricultural societies. So once we started to settle down as an agricultural societies, we learned many things via trial and error method only. And then we learned to domesticate plants and animals, and we passed on the skills, whatever we learned from generation to generation. So still now that our generations are passing the informations from generation to generation. And we also started to use plants as plants for medicinal purpose. So the knowledge that is being transferred from generation to generation, how to use plants as medicine is something called traditional medicine. So now then apart from that, once we started to settle down as agricultural society, then within 100 years, yes, you can see so much changes happened in human civilization. So one best example is globalization, where we can genetically manipulate food and we can produce foods in the industrial level. We don't really need to depend on farms and forest. So yeah, so that is so we started to use plants as medicine, right? Then the knowledge of how to use the plants for as medicine, that is something traditional medicine. So I come to the definition of traditional medicine after a few slides. So now you have a plant with you in your hand. So how the plant is going to be useful for you. There are four different aspects. So one aspect is you can isolate bioactive compounds for direct use as drugs. One such example is digitoxin and morphine. I think you all might be knowing very well about morphine and its uses. And the other aspect is to develop, yeah, sorry, now which slide is showing me? Just a minute, I'm just working on it. Is it visible now? Or uh, so far it was in this slide only. Oh, sorry about that. So is the slides are moving now? No? Yes. Then I just okay. Sorry about that. So I'll just see the slides now. So whatever I spoke so far. So this is my PhD physics, which is available in book format and my background and then my expertise. So I have structured my talk in this. First one is, and then I just talk about human history. So this is what I was talking about: hunter-gatherers and foraging societies. And then this is the human history, the flowchart of the human history. Like approximately 1.9 million years ago, we started to control food, control fire, which is helpful to cook the food. And then the last evolutionary shift in humans happened approximately 1,80,000 years ago, which is the ability to chase the food. So I hope you all followed up my words, what I was speaking. So via trial and error method, we learned how to domesticate plants and animals, and also started to use plants for medicine. So that aspect, how do you learn to use plants as medicine, is traditional medicine. So still now we are transferring that knowledge from generation to generation. I'll come back to that traditional medicine definition of a few slides. So now this is what. So you have a plant. So you can make use of the plants in four different aspects. One is to isolate bioactive compounds for direct use as drugs. For example, digitoxin and morphine. And also you can develop semi-synthetic compounds of novel or known structure as lead compounds. What I mean by semi-synthetic is, for example, morphine, as you all might be know, it's good pain reliever, as well as it is very addictive. People become addictive to morphine. So you can semi-synthesize, you can alter the structure so that the people may not become addictive. So that aspect is called semi-synthesis. Yeah, then, and also use the plant as precursor reagents for pharmacological tools. What I mean by precursor reagents is, some drug may have very good pharmacological effects, but it may not be very effective as you take that particular drug. You need to provide some other supplementary drug to activate the main drug. So that is one aspect of drug research. Then the other aspect is just use the whole plant or part of it. For example, you all might be knowing tulsi plant. We just take one or two leaves to cure cold or mild fever, something like that. So this is how you use the plants as therapeutic agents. So now I remember a question. There was a talk from a professor who was talking about flavonoids and polyphenols, I think. So there was a person who was asking a question about antiviral plants having antiviral properties. So I'm asking you the same question now. Approximately in our plant, we have 4 lakhs plants. So the 4 lakhs plants can be classified into algae, bryophytes, lycophytes, ferns, gymnosperm, and angiosperm. Angiosperms are flowering plants. All the plants that is in around us, majority of plants are angiosperms. So as I told that we have around 4 lakh plants. How do you choose a particular plant to discover a drug? So one person asked the question antiviral plant. So imagine you want to find a medicine for this coronavirus. So definitely there is a plant which has some chemical compound which will be surely help to cure this corona disease. So, but how do you select that particular plant out of these 4 lakh plants? So there are different approaches. So I just talk about one by one. So the main question is, how do you choose the plant for drug discovery out of 4 lakh plants in our planet? So one approach is called a random screen. So now you all imagine yourself that you have your college and you have your college campus. So imagine that you have approximately 300 different species of plants in your campus. Just go and collect all the 300 plants and randomly and just screen for anti-cancer property or antiviral property, any property that you are interested to study. So is it audible or hello? Is my slides are moving? Okay. I told that now imagine you are interested in antiviral plants. So just collect all the 300 plants. All college.
Audible.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so you just screen that one. So one of the largest random screen study was done by National Cancer Research Institute in USA. And then what they done is they just collected 35,000 plants, and then they wanted to look for anti-canceral properties, of some plants. So approximately what they found is out of 35,000 plants, only 4% has active in vitro, which has anti-cancerous property. However, they come up with a very good successful plant, which is Taxol, which was isolated from a plant called Taxus brevifolia, which is used to treat breast and ovarian cancer. However, one of the big disadvantages of this method is the success rate is statistically very low, and also it's very cost effective. It's not really cost effective. So this is one aspect of drug discovery. So I just summarize that plants from a specific regions are collected and screened for potential medicinal properties without regard of their taxonomic status, ethnobiotic status, or else any other quality. So the second approach, okay, so previously I told something called as random screen, right? Now the other approaches are called a targeted approach. So here among the targeted approach, among the targeted approaches, one of the approaches is called phylogenetic surveys. So there is another approach is also there, which is called chemotaxonomy. I'm not going into the chemotaxonomy aspects. So I'm just stick to phylogenetic aspects. What you do here is just study the close relatives of plants known to produce useful compounds. One example I will give you, we have a plant called Vidania somnifera in India, which is called ashwagandha. In Tamil they called Amukira, I think. So that plant is particularly grown only in India and which is native to India. However, if you look at the country called Ethiopia, under Vidania, the species is. So now you collect the plant of the Ethiopian Vidania species and Indian Vidania species, compare how close it is, and then you comparatively do a phylogenetic study and then choose that particular plant for drug discovery, which is called a phylogenetic study. So there are very good examples are there related to phylogenetic study. Then I go to the other aspect is called ecological surveys. So which is something called ecological study. So now you all imagine that there is a plant which grows in the desert. You know, it's very difficult to survive in the desert, right? But a plant which has the ability to survive in the desert. The same plant which grows everywhere cannot survive in the desert, right? So the plants growing in the desert has some special ability to survive in the tough condition. So similarly, you can imagine we have roads, but it's very difficult for a plant to grow in road. But there are chances that the roads are not used for a long time. There is a possibility some plant will grow in the road. That particular plant has some special ability to grow in tough condition. So you look for the plant which grows in a tough conditions, which is where the environment is really challenging. So you choose a plant and then look for and study about that plant, because the plant has the ability to survive in tough condition, has the special phytochemicals in it to survive. So that is something called ecological surveys, ecological based drug discovery. So just to summarize that, plants that live in particular habitats defends against predatory and herbivores. Yeah. And then another aspect I just wanted to give you kind of good story, which is plant defense hypothesis. We all have cattle, right? Like cow, sheep, and goat. So if you all carefully observe, in some plants the cattle will not, the goat or sheep or cow will not eat the young leaf. It just eats only the mature leaf. But in some other plants it eats only the young leaf and it will not eat the mature leaf. The reason is some plants will have a lot of phytochemical content only in the young leaf. It will not have in the mature leaf. Whereas in some other plant group, it is opposite. The mature group will have a lot of phytochemical content in it and not the young leaf. So, and also the plants which have the mature leaf will have a lot of venations in it. So these are all different plant defense mechanisms that a particular plant has in itself. So you can just observe these kind of category and choose a particular plant and then for your drug discovery. This is called something ecological study for a drug discovery. So now I move to traditional medicine based drug discovery. So this is also targeted approach. So it is very easy that previously I have told you that while we starting our day civilization, we also started to use plants as medicine. So that is traditional medicine. So we have already established knowledge, like our forefathers, they used some plants to cure some disease. So that knowledge is still with us. For example, in Tamil Nadu, we call Nadu Vaidyas. They are all expertise in giving some plants for you to cure some disease. And also we have Ayurveda and Siddha. So we have very established knowledge on plants and how to use that plant to cure particular disease, which is ethnopharmacology based drug discovery. So yeah, so this is what I was talking about. So as long as we live on this earth, we have used to either plants or animals, any metals to improve our health or cure. So documentation of this can be found as far as back approximately 6,000 years ago. So we can classify the traditional medicine into two types. One is documented traditional medicine, another is non-documented traditional medicine. The documented traditional medicine which is Ayurveda, Siddha, Unani, you can call in India, and then we have traditional Chinese medicine and Egyptian medicine and Greek and Roman period and their medicines. So what is meant by documented medicine is, for example, in Siddha medicine, we have Siddhas who wrote all the knowledge or their knowledge about plants in a book. They documented how to collect the plant, how to prepare formulation out of it, and how to give dosage, all those levels. They already documented that knowledge. That aspect comes under codified system of medicine or documented knowledge. And the other aspect is folk medicines, where still the knowledge is transferred orally from generation to generation. You can take the example, maybe my father, he told me that, okay, take Tulsi whenever you feel cold. But my father not written anything, okay, Tulsi is useful to cure cold. So that is just orally, right? So currently there are a number of research, there are so many funding agencies who wants to document all this knowledge before it's completely eradicated. For example, a 90-year-old grandmother or grandfather in our society, they will have enormous knowledge about traditional medicine, but nobody wants to talk about that and nobody wants to document it. So you just go to them, talk to them, just casually talk how many plants you know, how do you use plants, and document all those knowledge and publish that studies, which comes under ethnobotanical study. So this is what about traditional medicine, codified and non-codified systems of medicine. So this is something about overview of traditional medicine guided drug discovery. As I told, you can just identify indigenous people, go to them, talk to them, and document their knowledge. Once you documented their knowledge, approximately you may get just 10 plants also you may get as an answer, or else you will get 100 plants also as an answer. And different people have different knowledge about their plants. So you choose a plant, any particular plant, based on whether you want to study antiviral or anti-malarial. So you choose a plant and go for drug discovery process. So you choose a plant and then isolate the chemical compounds, or else you can do bioassay guided isolation and identification of bioactive compounds. And if your laboratory researchers are good, then you go for preclinical study and then clinical trials and then drugs to market. This is the overall protocol, like traditional medicine guided drug discovery. So I just give you a little bit history about some of the major drugs that we are still using with us, which are basically from traditional medicine. One traditional medicine is salicin, which is precursor of aspirin. So the the documented knowledge about salicin goes back to Eberi's papyrus, which is over 1500 BC, which was isolated from a plant called Salix alba, which is basically Egyptian traditional medicine. This plant is from Egyptian traditional medicine. So, and then we have morphine, which is isolated from Papaver somniferum, and we have so much reference about this particular plant, Papaver somniferum, across all the countries. And then digitoxin, which is from Digitalis purpura, and then we have another plant called artemisinin, which is isolated from Artemisia annona. The discovery of artemisinin as an anti-malarial compound got Nobel Prize in 2015. So if you guys are interested, you can read about the history behind artemisinin. So the Professor Yu Tu, she talks about her experience of how traditional Chinese medicine helped her to isolate artemisinin and for its anti-malarial property. Just a single example about this particular plant is Salix. So as I told that it is from traditional Egyptian medicine, approximately the knowledge goes back to 3,500 years ago. The people in Egyptian traditional medicine, they use it for its analgesic effects. And these many number of people have documented that knowledge, like Hippocrates, Galen, Discordis, and Pliny. And also, so how they use is the decoction of the bark of that particular species is used as a pain reliever and also to reduce the fever. So this is a bit of flowchart. So in 1964, some renowned scientist, Edward Stone, he uses willow bark as antipyretic, and then in 1824 they isolate a compound which can be useful as to relieve the pain. Then they isolate salicin, and then they isolate salicylic acid, and then they synthesize impure and unstable acetyl salicylic acid. There is another good story behind this. So people have found out that salicylic acid is the active compound or bioactive compound in the bark, which has this pain relief or else property. So, but if you give the salicylic acid in the raw form, people started to have stomach irritation, and then they have difficulties in bowel movement. So the salicylic acid, though it has a very good pharmacological property, people are not able to take salicylic acid. Then you do acetylation of salicylic acid. So you just semi-synthesize salicylic acid into acetyl salicylic acid so that you can avoid the side effects. So this is the history, little bit about salicylic acid. Then Bayer, the company, registered the acetyl salicylic acid in the name of aspirin, and they patented it, and then still aspirin is in the market. And just for some of the information, aspirin is one of the largest ever produced compound so far among any other medicine by its volume. So the flowchart of again the discovery of aspirin. So I told it started from the traditional medicine. So the people in 1828 found out the salicin, and then they isolate salicylic acid, and then it goes on. And also we are using paracetamol for everything. So paracetamol is also a derivative of salicin compound. And then the usefulness of that particular salicylic acid is still continuing. So ibuprofen is another drug. I hope you might have all heard. So that is also useful as a pain reliever drug. So it's also a derivative of the aspirin. So again, if you guys interested, you can go and read about this particular history of aspirin. It's really an interesting one. So this flowchart I took from British Journal of Hematology, published in 2017. So okay, so now I move to my PhD research. So I hope you all have read by now. So it's not anything complicated question. I have not took anything complicated in my PhD research also. So that just a general question: gender in plants. Do you know male and female plants? What is your choice while using it for medicine or timber? This is one objective of my PhD research. So I done this research and I published this as in Journal of Ethnopharmacology, which is the title is Ethnobotany of Dioecious Species, Traditional Knowledge on Dioecious Plants in India. So, okay, so in simple terms, you can easily observe that in humans, we have two different genders, male and female. But when you take plants, the gender in plants are not uniform. It has different categories. The sexual systems in angiosperm are in different categories. One form is called a hermaphrodite, where both male and female parts are in the same flower. So almost 95% of the plants that we have in our planet is hermaphrodite, which is bisexual plants. One example is hibiscus, rosa senescens, Semperthi, I can say. Then the other aspect is monoecious plants. Hardly 5% of this plant, bisexual plants are approximately 90%, and another 5% is monoecious plants, and the other 5% is dioecious plants. To give some examples about monoecious plants, where male and female flowers are present in the same individual plants. You might all know Pusanicea. Pusanicea is a monoecious plant. You can see male flower and female flower in that particular plant. And also coconut, Ilanir, it also has male flower separate and female flowers separate. Those are all monoecious plants. And then we also have dioecious plants, where the male plant is totally different and female plants are totally different individual plants. So I was a little bit interested about these dioecious plants for my PhD. So approximately only 15,000 plants are dioecious plants in this planet. So approximately just 4%. So to give some examples, Panay you all might be knowing, I think. So Panay is one of the best example of dioecious plants. Male Panay is there, which never gives fruits. Only the female plant gives the fruits. And then Vethalai also have male and female. And then in biryani, people use Jadipatri, Jadikai. That plant is also male plant and female plant. Anyway, so those are some of the examples of dioecious plants. So now I'm coming to plants resource allocation theory. Why I'm interested in this dioecious plants? As you can easily see in animals, including humans, male are more muscular in nature. You can see men or boys are more taller than girls and they are more muscular, whereas girls are not really taller or muscular. Why it is it's something called plants resource allocation theory. Take example that a boy takes 1000 calories of energy and girl also takes 1000 calories of energy, but their physiology, how the physiology metabolize that 1000 calories between boy and girl are different. Whereas the male plant or even including animals, the boys tend to spend its calories mainly on growth and also in reproduction or else in defense, whereas it is slightly different for females. So there is how do you spend that 1000 calories, whether you spend it for reproduction or maintenance. Maintenance means your immunity or defense, or else in reproduction or growth. So there is a trade-off. How do you spend the 1000 calories? So I was interested in this particular concept to study the difference between male and female plant phytochemistry. Yeah, so that is my objective, and that is what I've done in my PhD study. So the aim of the study is to study and document whether Indian folk healers means Nadu have preference for plant genders and their knowledge on dioecious plants, and also to understand the concept of plant gender in Ayurveda. So the methodology, what I done is I shortlisted how many dioecious plants are present in India. That is the first step to do. And then the second step is choose a particular area or particular ethnic people to document their knowledge. What I done is I chose Kollimalai and then Kotagiri and then Sithilingi Valley, which is in Dharmaburi. So I just went to them and I interviewed approximately 40 different folk healers and then documented their knowledge. The questions were simple. I just asked them, do you know anything about male and female plants? If they say yes, then document what are all that. And then once they say, and then I will ask them, okay, now you know there are male and female plants. Do you use male plants separately to cure some disease and female plants to cure some disease? So that's the question. And then I ask them and then document their knowledge. And then plant gender and Ayurveda is there any reference in Ayurveda about plant? So I just interviewed some 20 doctors to document this knowledge. So what I found in Indian systems of medicine, we have approximately 5 to 7% of medicinal plants are dioecious in nature. So as I asked them, do you know about male and female plants? Out of 40 herbal folk healers that I asked, 31 people answered yes, that they know about male and female plants. And then out of 40, and then I chose 40 plants to document their knowledge. So when it comes to preference towards any particular gender, one aspect is Piper petal and another aspect is Tinospora cordifolia. Piper petal is Vetthalai and another is Tinospora cordifolia, which is Sindil Kodi in Tamil we call. And then people have differential usage among different categories. When it comes to Ayurveda, there is no straightforward evidence on gender preference to prepare medicine or treat illness. So the data, if you are more interested, you can go and read over there. So the step is continuous, then the drug discovery process, right? I mean, I documented the traditional knowledge and then select one particular plant and then study it in the laboratory and look for its phytochemical property or else any bioactivity. So I use the term called drug discovery, right? One is ethnobotany-based drug discovery, where you can also call it the other term called validation of traditional knowledge. You don't necessarily need to go and find a new compound to cure some disease. There is other aspects which is called validation of traditional knowledge. What I mean by validation is that, so the knowledge, the traditional knowledge is transferred orally from generation to generation. There is no proof whether the traditional knowledge is working or not. So you documented the knowledge. If you validate that knowledge, yes, whatever the folk healer is said is right or not. So that is something under validation of traditional knowledge. I come back to this validation of traditional knowledge in later slides. So to choose something to either to validate traditional knowledge or to discover some new compounds, I chose Canarium strictum plant, which is called Sambrani in Tamil, Sambrani plant. There are different category of Sambranis in our culture. Canarium strictum is what Karungumbili we call. So I chose that plant. So the knowledge what I got from the people is Canarium strictum, what the people observed is male trees produce less resin. Resin is that, so male plant produce less resin, whereas female trees produce more resin. So I was interested in this. Okay, this is something as interesting. So how the usefulness of the resin is people used to treat arthritis or rheumatism or else for pain in the joints. So they just apply the fresh resin in the joints to get relief from arthritis or rheumatism or joint bone pains. So yeah, that is the aim of this study. I just wanted to document their knowledge and also to investigate the chemical constituents of resins and stem bark for its anti-inflammatory properties and also antioxidant. Sorry. So the methodology is I again interviewed 10 different folk healers in Kotagiri, and then I also collected resin and stem bark for my phytochemical research. So the first step, I have used dichloromethane and methanol to isolate the phytochemical compounds, which is the crude extract, and then do fractionation and isolation. Just from the crude extract, you isolate single individual compounds, and then I identified compounds using NMR. So in this, I want to say I'm not a chemist. My PhD supervisor helped me a lot, and I also have my colleague Christian Winter who helped me to do this biochemistry or pharmacological studies. I'm not at all expert in this. This is where we collaborate. We take help from others. So with the help of my colleagues back in University of Oslo, I studied in vitro studies, which is antioxidant property, and also look for anti-inflammatory axis studies using cell lines, and also the toxicity study. So what we found is that generally people use, people also use it for common cold and runny nose, sneezing, breathing. I mean, just you burn the resin inside your home if you have runny nose or cold, and also people use as incense and also fumigation. So the major compounds what we identified from the resin is alpha amerine, beta amerine. These two compounds are already well known for its anti-inflammatory property. So it's this resin has so much of alpha amerine and beta amerine. From the stem bark, we identified gallic acid and methyl acetate, and then several other compounds. So what we found is bark showed higher antioxidant activity, and toxicity was not toxic at all. Then for its anti-inflammatory, resin showed concentration-dependent anti-inflammatory activity. Okay, guys. So this one, when it comes to male and female plants, I'm not giving the results here, and also we have not yet completed this study, and we have not published this one. This is still ongoing. Hopefully, in another few years, we will be able to come up with some good results to publish and come. Is there any difference between male Sambrani plant and female Sambrani plant? So this is one of the ongoing research. So apart from that, I done something about male and female plant. There are so many research articles, especially in India, National Botanical Research Institute in Lucknow. They have in Sindalkodi, I hope you might have heard about this medicinal plant called Sindalkodi, Tinospora cordifolia they call. So they have done enormous research on that particular plant to show the difference between male plant and female plant. These are all some of that particular research group publications. So this is about my PhD research. Now I move to the current practices of traditional medicine-based drug discovery. So this approach is called a laboratory to clinic approach. I mean, you do the research in the lab and then you go to the clinic, you do the clinical trial. So that's why it is called a laboratory to clinic approach. It generally involves the expertise of different researchers. You need pharmacologists, pharmacognosists, medicine people, and botany, organic chemist people, analytical chemistry, and toxicologists. So if you want to find a new drug, you all need expertise from all these research people. So again, I'm just going to summarize the traditional medicine-based drug discovery. So as I previously told, you collect a plant either by any approach, either traditional medicine-guided drug discovery, or else randomly you choose a plant, or else do an ecological study and choose a plant. Anyway, you choose a plant, and then the next step is to extract all the compounds from the plant. There are different methods of extraction, which is conventional techniques are water extraction and organic solvent extraction. And there are several other new techniques, which is microwave new drug extraction, supercritical extraction. These are some of the other methods. So here I just want to give you a kind of information. Like now you have a plant material and you have extraction. So based on the solvent, what is the solvent that you are going to use to extract all the compounds from the plant matters much. So if you are using methanol, what are all the compounds the methanol extract from the plant is different than when you use petroleum ether extract or else ethanol. So you should be very careful in what solvent system that you will be using to extract compounds. So this is one example, the Garcinia species. So different solvent system gave rise to different phytochemical compounds, and obviously each phytochemical compounds will have different properties. So this is next step is extraction step. Then this is again a summary. So you have a crude extract, either you go by bioassay guided fractionation of compounds, or else you can fractionate the compounds and go for bioactivity one by one, like each individual compound you can study. So then you use the techniques called TLC, HPLC, preparatory HPLC. So many chromatographic methods are there to fractionate and isolate single individual compounds. And then you need the help of NMR to structurally find what compound it is. And then you need mass spectrometry to determine the molecular weight of the compounds. Then you do toxicity study, and then once you determine in vitro have a very good results in vitro studies, then you go for preclinical studies in animals, and then if again it is successful, then go for clinical studies, and everything is really good, then you go for industrial production. So this is overall protocol. So however, there are few disadvantages when it comes to traditional medicine based drug discovery. One major aspect is the availability of plant material. Take example, now you are planning to study a plant which may have very good activity, but only 100 plants are there in whole India. Then obviously you cannot choose that particular plant to study. So that is because once you start to, already the plant is 100, if you start to collect, then the plant become extinct. And the other reason is there is a season dependent chemical variation in the plant. If you take example, in rainy season, the plant may have different chemical compound, whereas in summer season, it will have very different compounds. That is called a season dependent chemical composition. And obviously I told conservation status, whether the plant is so much is there or it's really rare plant. The species with conservation status is one of the disadvantages. And obviously there are reports. Once you say that, okay, this plant has cure for something, people will just commercially cut that plant and sell it everywhere. So then obviously that plant will become extinct due to unsustainable harvesting. So the other aspect is sustainably you have to use. So I'm not just going much deep into it. So another major disadvantage, drug-resistant microorganism. I hope you all might be coming up across this term. Like antibiotics, the microbes are becoming resistant to antibiotics. So again, so all the single drug molecules that you isolate from plants will obviously, once you start to use again and again, the disease or the microbes will become resistant to that single drug. So that is called drug-resistant microorganism. So yeah, drug resistance. And also you have there are some sort of side effects, which is cytotoxic or immunosuppressants. Another drawback is emerging disease where no medicines are available. And then the cost of the drug, there are several drugs which are unaffordable for people in low-income countries. Okay, so I come back to the synergism in later few slides. Okay, so now the current practice in traditional medicine is at least you need 10 to 15 years to find a drug and to bring it in the market. And it costs around 1 to 1.5 billion US dollars. So it is very, very expensive. And also you need to wait at least 10 to 15 years. There are cases that you will have a very good compound. Like for 15 years, you have done very good research, but getting approval for the particular drug is really difficult. So if you fail to get approval, then the industry which is behind the discovery of this drug lost 1 to 1.5 billion US dollars. So these are all some of the disadvantages. And also there are another term called intellectual property rights in traditional medicine. So the intellectual property rights it's not allows the pharma industries to patent any drugs that comes out of traditional medicine. So I'm not going much detail into it. So only a little bit example. We have Convention on Biological Diversity, like most of the countries in the world have agreed on Convention on Biological Diversity, which is the intellectual property rights that I was talking about. So if you guys have time, you should read about this. If you are planning to do any research on medicinal plants, especially when you are out of India, you should get special permission to do research on Indian medicinal plants, or else any particular country's medicinal plants. In Chennai, we have National Biodiversity Authority. That is the office where you apply, which is to do research on medicinal plants of India. Anyway, so this I'm not going much detail into. Anyway, so now I come to a kind of term called reverse pharmacology. This is one of the alternative to conventional drug discovery process. So as I previously told, we have traditional knowledge. on medicinal plants. So this approach is called clinics to laboratory. As I previously told, the other approach, you do some research in lab and then go to clinic. Whereas this reverse pharmacology is clinics to laboratory. So clinics to laboratory, as I told, that from like for since the day of civilization, as I told, we are using plants as medicine. So that if you take this particular plant, you get some relief out of it. That is the knowledge that you have already. So that is kind of clinical study which have happened across all these years. So you have knowledge. You just validate that knowledge and then validate that knowledge, which is something called reverse pharmacology. So it's approximately takes 5 to 6 years, and it's really little bit far cheaper than the other approach, which is 2 to 20 million US dollars. So which can lead to new drugs. If you start research on this aspect, which can lead to a single drug molecule also, or else herbal formulation, and which helps to this approach, reverse pharmacology, helps to standardize this Ayurveda or Siddha herbal formulations. And the aspect of synergism. Synergism means many different bioactive compounds together helpful for you rather than single drug molecule. And then it helpful for you. So you can develop proof of concept or validate the traditional knowledge. So that is what I was telling you. So in India, across the world, since the globalization, World Health Organization, they want to develop complementary and alternative medicine for the countries like Europe and USA. They want scientific proof that Ayurveda is working. So in order to implement, or else if you want to, I'll come back to this in later slides. If you want to sell your Ayurvedic products in Europe or USA, you need to have proof for that, right? That is the validation of traditional knowledge. Okay, so one small example where my PhD supervisor involved in developing anti-malarial compounds using reverse pharmacological approach. So as you all know, malaria is one of the dangerous disease. So there is a country called Mali in Africa, so where the malaria is really bad over there. So there the folk healers, what they do, they use this particular plant called Arigmona mexicana to treat malaria. So what they done, the reverse pharmacology, you just go to the folk healers, document their knowledge, how they give Arigmona, this plant decoction to treat malaria. So once you documented that knowledge, you prepare a decoction and you just take control people and then study groups. So what they done, they given this Arigmona mexicana plant decoction to 301 patients, among which 197 patients received this decoction, and another 101, the previous is 197. The other is 101 people received the artemisinin amodigoquinine as first line treatment to treat malaria. So what they found is this decoction is helpful to cure malaria, where the people, they don't need second line treatment to cure malaria. So this is called reverse pharmacological approach. So this is the formulation that they came up with, and then it is one of the Mali government approved anti-malarial formulation to treat malaria in the country Mali. So he's a folk healer who involved in all this research, I believe. So this is so far about the drug discovery aspects, and then I just talked a little bit about quality control aspects of drug. So one aspect is called, as I told, that globalization. So globalization made the craft-based tradition. Craft-based tradition is we just transfer knowledge orally and local usage to become one of the globalized industry. We have some of the top performing herbal industries in India, like Himalaya, Dabur, and Baba Ramdev, Patanjali. These are all some of the globalized industry. So this makes the competition to regulate and do some quality control work on those products. So there is a heavy competition between India and China, who are interested in taking advantage out of this traditional medicine to improve their economy. So in India, we have approximately 7,000 to 8,000 medicinal plants, and these are all the classification. Like in Ayurveda, there are documented knowledge about 2,559 plants, and in different categories we have documented knowledge about all these medicinal plants. So approximately the economic value of our traditional medicine trade is approximately 7,000 crore. Our trade demand for medicinal plants is approximately 7,000 crores. So we trade approximately around 5,12,000 metric tons of dry weight medicinal plants within India, and also we export everything. So as I told that the World Health Organization wants to implement this traditional medicine as complementary and alternative medicine in other countries like Europe and USA. However, they want quality assurance, safety, efficacy of all this herbal medicine. In a way, the scientific proof for our herbal medicine that saying that this herbal medicine is working. You can take, there is no side effects or problem, it is completely safe. So that's where the quality control aspects comes in. So my expertise is something particularly the authenticity issue. Is there any adulteration or adulteration, or people use duplicated plant material and so on. So the different aspects of authenticity problem is, for example, plants may have microbes, the herbal formulation maybe have microbes, or else it has mycotoxin, or else you use some other plant rather than using the original plant, and so on. So these are all some of the authenticity issues. So these are all the currently available quality control methods. One is botanical methods. You just study the macroscopy and microscopic thing, and then you just do some physicochemical parameters. And also when it comes to chemical, you do these chromatographic techniques to compare with marker compounds. I will come back to it little by little. So then the other aspects is biological, whether is there any fungal contamination or bacterial contamination. And also there is another aspect is called organoleptic, where you identify the plant based on its texture, fraction, taste, and smell. Okay, so far all the pharmacopoeias and monographs, it contains the details about macroscopy and microscopy, and also chromatographic techniques. There is an upcoming technique called DNA barcoding. My expertise particularly on DNA barcoding. This European Medicine Agency in Europe and Food and Drug Administration in US and the Indian Pharmacopoeia Commission, they support the innovative technologies like DNA barcoding. So this is again, these three techniques are so far included in all the pharmacopoeias and monographs across the world. One is macroscopy. Macroscopy, how do you identify a plant based on the flower and their flower structures and so on. And then the microscopy, you take a section out of the plant and then you study the different microscopic characters so that you can identify the plant. And another aspect is analytical aspects of the plant. So you study the chemical compounds and compare with the marker compounds with the analytical chemistry methods. Okay, so I think I'm taking too much time. So this is again my another PhD objective, which is I have my PhD thesis in 2 chapters. For chapter 1 is drug discovery, chapter 2 is quality control aspect. This comes under chapter 2. So the quality control aspects of Garcinia species. Garcinia, I think you might have people hear that Kodambuli. People highly in Kerala, they use this Kodambuli. And in Tamil Nadu also we use this, it is called Kodambuli. Majorly they use to make biryani. So I want to check the quality of this particular plant. So that is in forest, that is how the fruits look. And in the market, herbal market, the dried fruits looks like that. And then, one of why it shows this particular plant is there is a chemical compound called hydroxycitric acid. This particular hydroxycitric acid is available only in Garcinia species. It's not available in any other plant. And also hibiscus also have this compound, but very little amount. So I was interested in this one, and also this plant Garcinia, which is majorly available only in India. It's not growing anywhere else, and also it grows in few Asian countries. But however, the demand for this particular product, Garcinia gambogia, is really high because it has a property for weight loss or else anti-obesity. So the demand for this product is very less. However, the production of these fruits are little less. So I felt that there may be some quality problem with this particular compound. And also you can very easily produce this hydroxycitric acid in the industry without the fruits. So the people sell this product as natural, like it's really from the fruits, but it may not be true. People completely synthesize in the industry and sell it as a natural products. So this is my question I have, and then I just wanted to check the quality of these products. So, however, to do this study, I have different objectives. One is, okay, I'm not going into the methodology aspects. So what I found is that in the Western Ghats of Merku Todarchi Malai, people approximately collect, so this is called value chain. Value chain means how people collect medicinal plants or its parts in the forest, how it comes to market, and from market, how it reaches industry, and from industry, how it goes to the consumers. You study the complete chain and check the quality in every aspect. That is called a value chain. So I'm not going anyway. So used on DNA barcoding, what I found is there is no adulteration in this particular species in terms of raw drugs. However, when I try to check the hydroxycitric acid content, there are several variations. So what I mean is, in the natural form, if you are isolating hydroxycitric acid from the fruits, it should be available in two forms all the time. One is pure hydroxycitric acid and another is hydroxycitric acid lactone form. However, when you study the products from the final products, what we found in cases only hydroxycitric acid, it's not, it may suggest that the people may not really use these Garcinia fruits to prepare the products. That is the conclusion that we are trying to say in this study. So again, there is a good labeling practice. The people sell that each individual tablet is 500 mg and it contains particular quantity of hydroxycitric acid. However, when we measure using the method called quantitative NMR, we found totally different quantity of hydroxycitric acid in it. So then I move to another aspect called DNA metabarcoding. Okay, this is little bit of, there is a difference between DNA barcoding and metabarcoding. Okay, this I'm not going into it. So this is again another paper from my research publication. What I done is I purchased the Ayurvedic herbal products available in European market and then look for its quality. So what the flowchart goes like this. You buy a product from the pharmacies like this and then isolate DNA, do PCR, amplify the products, and then using there is a whole genome next generation DNA sequencing platform. You just completely sequence all the DNA and look for what are all the plant species added there. You might be seeing. Okay, so I bought something products like this. As I told, I want to check the quality of the products, so I purchased. So as you can see, if you buy a product, you can also see the labels like this, where they mention they added plants like Vidania somnifera, Centella asiatica, and so on. However, when we isolate DNA and check exactly whether what they labeled here is really can be found in these products like this. So that is our test. So for that, I purchased products like tablets, capsules, powders from pharmacies, and also we ordered online from these 3 countries. So what we found is that, the products what we found is single ingredient products and multi-ingredient products. Only 2 products out of 12 products, contain species as per label, whereas 6 products contain other species and also the species which are labeled in their products. When it comes to multi-ingredient products, the results are really poor. When it comes to only 8 products, out of 27 products, 8 products contain none of the species what they labeled in their products. So this is something related to quality control aspects. So with this, I like to thank you all for the patient listening. I hope it is interesting for you people. And also I want to thank my supervisors across different research supervisors that I work with. My main supervisor is Dr. Hella Wangenstens and Hugo de Boer, Berit, and all the other researchers, and also funding agencies. And one more final slide. For publishing some research, like don't publish in some journals where you pay 1,000 rupees, 2,000 rupees, and then you published in 10 days, 15 days. That aspect is called predatory publication. University Grants Commission have UGC care list. Read about that, and if you are doing some research, publish in really good journals. don't publish in predatory journals. This is one of the biggest problem happening in India across the world about the poor quality publications. This is just for your kind of information. So yeah, guys. So with that, thank you, everyone. If you want to contact, this is my email ID. You guys can write to me. I'll be happy to suggest anything about this. Thank you so much. Sorry, guys. I accidentally just left the meeting. Good evening. I can hear you. Yes. Yes, it should. That is for the single body what they found, male and female plant. They come out with the male plant, but the quantity of the compound is very different than the female plant. So they are trying to prove there is a possibility slight variation will be there. I mean, not the efficacy of the pharmacological activity might be varying between male and female plants. Yes, yes, there is phytochemical variation. Yes. Okay. Yes. Okay. DNA barcoding is something which is, you might have heard about that term called DNA fingerprinting. So DNA barcoding is little bit advanced than uh, DNA barcoding is advanced than DNA fingerprinting. So you isolate DNA, and there are several databases like National Center for Biotechnological Information, Barcode of Life databases. So the main aim behind this DNA barcoding is, now imagine yourself that you are going to a supermarket. There you scan a product, right? You scan that, and then all the details comes in the screen, like what is the cost of that product. The future aim of DNA barcoding is something like that. You just on field some instrument, you identify what species it is. So that is the future long-term goal behind DNA barcoding. So the current initiatives, current research, to completely deposit the DNA sequences of all the species present in this planet in two different data. Yeah, one of the main databases, Barcode Life database. So you take a plant, there are some genes which are recommended for you people to amplify. You isolate DNA, amplify that particular region, and then sequence it, and then that region, the genetic variation between the species, that is called a DNA barcoding. That region will be, the particular genetic variation will be useful to identify that particular species. That is DNA barcoding. Maybe, yeah, if you're interested, you can write to me. I'll just share the flowchart because due to time concern, I didn't share all those. So this is DNA barcoding. DNA barcoding is typically done using standard sequencing platform. It means only one time, one species, one gene you can sequence at a time. That is something DNA barcoding. DNA metabarcoding is using the next generation sequencing machine platforms where the whole genome sequences are done. This DNA barcoding is called DNA sequencing, where you can simultaneously sequence as many species that you want. Yeah, that is the difference between these. No, in this case, you don't need to choose the medicinal plant. You choose a particular region and compare. For example, you take Australia. There are some what are their names? Yeah, there are some ethnic people there, tribal people there. They use medicinal plants. You just go to the literature and take what are all the plants that they use. And also you come to India and take particular location and particular tribal people. Take what are all the plants that we are using here in our community. And also you take African country. You choose any particular tribe and location. Choose all the plants. So take example from 3 different countries. You choose 300 each, 300 plants. So these 300 plants, you compare, you do phylogenetic analysis. What will happen is you can clearly see the pattern there. So the plant what we are using in India, the plant in the same genus. In Africa, they use different species. So you can easily see the correlation there. It's called cross-cultural phylogenetic study. So first thing you need to choose the ethnic tribal people and the region to do that study. So it's like you can choose as many as number of plants that you want. Yeah. Chemical taxonomy is something like, for example, not much explained into antiviral thing. I just know a little bit about chemotaxonomy, chemical taxonomy. So, for example, this is not true. This is assumption. You have a plant called alkaloid, which we imagine that alkaloid have antiviral property. So you choose plants, all the plants which are rich in alkaloids. So you construct a chemodendrogram or dendrogram. You will easily find the plants which are richer in alkaloids will have similar cladding pattern. So from that you choose a plant for that particular activity. So that is how you can go. So this is forming a clade based on the chemical compounds. So this is something about chemotaxonomy. I'm sorry, I'm not sure about antiviral plants.
Sir.
Thank you.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Thanks for your wonderful and informative presentation, sir.
Thank you.
Sir, on behalf of our management, hereby express my wholehearted thanks to you and your management for giving such a wonderful, informative, and elaborated presentation.
Thank you, sir.
And please let me know, sir, in future when you are would like to plan India, Tamil Nadu.
Yes, sir.
I will arrange the international seminar, sir.
Yes, sir.
For
Sure, I will.
development of our future students' career, sir.
Yes, sir. Sure, I will do that. Yeah.
Please, sir. Please, sir.
Yes, surely I will come. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
for your presentation, sir.
Yes.
Take
Thank you
care,
very
sir.
much.
Take care,
Yes.
sir. Take care.
Yes. You also
Bye,
take care.
sir.
Bye.
Bye, sir.
Bye.